It's Trucks.
Yeah.
Welcome to what is probably the second to last episode
Yeah, I
of
think
this
this
season
is
of Trucks.
penultimate season 2 Trucks right here.
Well,
Time just keeps moving on, doesn't it?
I'm sorry to tell you, Truckos, that our plan is mostly to talk about literature, but to give you something to pay... Oh, by the way, we're in Europe, and we're taking scrap metals to Verona.
Yeah.
Because we're in Europe, we don't know how long this is going to be.
This is true.
We forgot what distance to shoot for, so maybe this is long, maybe this is short.
Could
you
be.
can see, we don't.
We might have given up on this halfway through.
Maybe.
There's no way of knowing.
Yeah, but...
Except you know already, clearly.
I don't know, we could give up on this halfway through and then, stick something else on the latter half. Who
That's
knows?
true, that's
There's all kinds of surprises
All that
in store.
content that we have stored up, ready to make public.
Okay, so
Before
we talk about literature...
Half-Life 3 was confirmed.
Yeah.
It's confirmed that it's not happening. But one of the guys who was hired to be at Valve not writing anything for years and years before finally leaving the company cleverly released a little epistle which contained what was meant to be the plot of Half-Life 2 Episode 3.
Yeah, seemingly his ideas for that project.
Considered to be. Which was fun because he made up fun new names for everybody.
He gender swapped everybody.
Yeah, that was a nice little conceit.
Okay, before we get into this, I want to talk about just a little bit. Half-Life gender swapped has a curious effect. Like, imagine being a woman escorting man Alex around, and like the fact that Alex is always telling you what to do takes on a slightly different tone, doesn't it?
It does.
It's the genders that it currently has work better, I think.
Yeah, it's slightly less problematic that way.
but anyway, yeah, like it's kind of a weirdly momentous thing that the plans for Half-Life 2 Episode 3
because it's been clouded in so much mystery, secrecy.
Yeah. And you know, like neither of us, we like Half-Life. We think the story of Half-Life is compelling, but it's not really the thing that keeps you coming to Half-Life.
No, really mostly the emotions that I felt while I was reading it were, oh, that would have been fun.
Yeah, it would have been fun.
That would have
years
been fun
ago.
to do.
If they released that today, it would have been like, really? That's
what you've got. But no, it's been rendered untenable by sheer attenuation.
Yeah.
If you don't mind my saying a thing.
No, it's totally true. But I think Laidlaw, the way he wrote this, very cleverly kind of sidestepped those expectations by making it a sad little piece of writing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I think what's kind of most remarkable about it is how clearly you can picture the way that would have looked in game.
Yeah, no, I had the images in my head the whole time through.
Right down to the pane of unbreakable glass that descends to separate you from Alex while she kills her stepmom.
Yeah. State-of-the-art 2007 graphics.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been perfect.
Yeah. But I like it. I think, for the most part, it's just a fun little sci-fi action-adventure romp. But I think what's kind of remarkable about it as an artifact is that despite just being kind of a to B to C kind of plot with a few like with a little room in there for fun character stuff, like it would have been pretty cool to hear Breen's lines.
Yeah.
In that situation. Jesus Christ, my truck is handling really badly.
I think probably Breen the slug monster would have
been the highlight.
Yeah. I was gonna say it would have been like a difficult thing to enjoy in game.
Really? I think hearing him monologue at you from his slug body would have been amazing. Breen's lines were always my favorite part of the Half-Life games.
Yeah. He was a talented voice actor.
Yeah. But I think what's kind of remarkable about it is how this silly little plot takes on such a tone of melancholy as you read it.
Exactly, because this is the other side of the sky kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is
and it still ends on
the stories that we don't get to hear. Yeah. Well, every Half-Life game was gonna sound like
yeah, it's like the same fucking cliffhanger. Oh well.
The joke that I always wanted was Black Mesa and Aperture interacting in game.
Yeah.
Which, would have been stupid to actually happen.
Right. And they did it with some restraint.
Yep.
In this plot, there's none of the No mention of Cave Johnson, no mention of GLaDOS, not even this, no AI in sight even.
Just a ship.
Yeah, just a ship.
I'm
Aperture scientists like dealing with a sudden familiar catastrophe, and it's not even GLaDOS' rampancy, it's just the Combine invading.
Yeah.
And we know there's a link between those things from the clues in Portal 1, and that's enough. You gotta admire the restraint.
Indeed. Ah, man.
Anyway,
It made me feel good to see that.
yeah.
It was a nice little, and like the whole like, hey guys, sorry I've been in suspended animation for 10 years. You know, it seemed very plausible and
Yeah.
and personally relevant to this human being. Also,
The final paragraph is really what elevates this thing.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
a little glimpse of not interior monologue really, but sort of a reflective missive from Gordon Freeman, like talking about his faded relevance, his almost having forgotten what he was even up to, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Clearly talking in code about Valve, but also perfectly like a multi-layered little bit of work there.
that's nice. I've since the beginning of time I've been here for the tragedy of neglected fictional characters. So it's been my
Gordon's
jam
our new
since
hero.
day one. Plus, it was nice, and then it gave my brain the chance to do something it hasn't done for a while, which is the name of Gordon's gender swap is Gertie, and I was thinking, how does Morgan become Gertie?
Gordon.
I know. But that's what I thought for a good 5 minutes or so before I realized that I'd done it again.
In Prey, you play as a scientist who can be either gender, and their name is Morgan, either way, which people read as a shout-out to Gordon Freeman.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or Morgan Freeman,
She also
for that
wears,
matter.
She also wears a orange jumpsuit.
Well, that's out of the way now.
Yeah, shall we talk about...
We've paid homage to a video game that people should have gotten over. It wasn't happening a long time ago, and pretty much had at this point. It was pretty much only after nobody was still saying Half-Life 3 when that this guy...
Yeah.
You know.
Revived the issue.
Exactly. Wow, you were driving,
dude,
like crazy nuts.
I think I took a heavy load by mistake, because this truck is drifting like crazy.
On rainy mountain roads.
Yeah, maybe.
Very exciting.
I wonder if the slipperiness is a thing.
High difficulty trucks. Did you see that the Mabim Bam brothers did a truck video?
Did they?
They did, and apparently it was found by a whole bunch of real truckers who were all commenting about how much they loved it and loved watching him try to park and all of that stuff.
God damn it, guys!
Fucking
copying our audience.
Unbelievable.
The audience we've never found.
Yeah, it just goes to show, like, being talented and funny is really helpful in finding an audience.
But also having an audience already
that's
helpful.
Presumably also a thing that's important. But yeah,
we can be as funny as the McElroys if we try.
I bet we can. I can give myself a funny voice like Griffin does.
Dude, I can't. This truck is impossible to turn.
Oh man,
I think what I should be doing is driving super slowly the whole way. But like, I have a fucking schedule to keep here. This video can't be an hour long.
Yeah, no, you gotta pedal to the metal, roid to the Floyd.
All right, shall we?
Yeah, it's 9 minutes in. We're
Let's
gonna
talk about a book.
We haven't done this season. We did this once in season 1 where we both talked about a book that we'd read.
Yeah.
The book in this case is by Anne Carson. It is Autobiography of Red.
We mentioned it a few episodes ago.
The conceit of this book is that it is first a translation of fragments of a Greek poem
by Stesichoros.
About Gurion, the dude who was the keeper of the...
I think it's important to outline the frame of this thing.
Yeah.
It opens with a kind of...
I'm outlining the frame.
Okay.
I'm telling you about who Gurion was first.
Yeah, but it first opens with the profile on Stesichoros.
All right. We'll do it in the order the book does it.
Yeah.
She talks about Stesichoros first, and she, in a lovely mystical way, about...
how he's good at adjectives.
Yeah, about the problem... It's one of... I think that Josh and I will both say that the amount of pleasure to be gained from this book is extremely front-loaded.
Yeah.
But there's
seems intentional.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's a lovely... Like, it's one of those things where the structure, mirrors the tragedy.
Yeah.
But a lovely little thing about the importance of this almost forgotten poet whose work only exists in fragments, and then talks about the fragments of this particular work that he did, which is about a guy who was murdered by Hercules.
Yes, one of his great deeds was murdering this guy, and
stealing his red flock.
Yes, and one of the important things about the poems Stesichorus wrote, especially at the time, is that rather than focusing on Hercules' perspective, or Heracles, as the book prefers.
We're talking Greeks. Heracles is fine.
Yeah, it does it from Gerion's perspective, the monster's perspective, and the whole thing becomes a kind of inevitable tragedy.
Indeed, it is all about how it is kind of awful that Heracles came onto this island and stole this guy's stuff and killed his dog and killed him.
Could you dig into that?
Kind of a bad thing.
Could you read the total things known about Geryon from that intro? Because this is a real translation of a real Greek poem, but it's toward the end of that.
Yeah.
It's loosely done.
It's extremely loose, I would say.
Yes.
To the point where I had a question in my head as I was reading this about whether she had made this poet and this poem up.
I went and looked it up myself and was surprised, in fact, to learn that it was real.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense given that she's a classicist.
Yeah,
this is where the inspiration would spring from. But it's like, all right, but this is fragment 15 of 16.
Yes.
Total things known about Geryon. He loved lightning. He lived on an island. His mother was a nymph of a river that ran to the sea. His father was a gold cutting tool. Old scholia say that Stesichorus says that Geryon had 6 hands and 6 feet and wings. He was red, and his strange red cattle excited envy. Heracles came and killed him for his cattle. The dog, too.
This is transcendent stuff. This is really, really good. And the intro is good, too. We kind of didn't characterize the intro, but it's like, it sounds a bit like some scholarly commentary on Stesichorus, but it's just a bit too poetic to really be that.
Yeah.
Like, the way it ends is, it describes the fragments as having fallen out of a box in a random order, but it says you can continue shaking the box, which is a very lovely kind of description of what translation is.
Also draws a direct line between the accidental approach of Stesichorus having been made into this by history and the deliberate approach of Gertrude Stein.
Yes.
Which is a nice trick.
Yeah, it kind of proposes Stesichorus as a forerunner of modern literature, which the main body of this book definitely runs with. But before that, one note I want to say about the translation of the original poems, and I'm just slip-sliding all over this road. I hope it stops raining soon.
I think that this is high difficulty poetry discussion.
Yes, 4%, 3%, and I'm unable to look through the book while doing this too.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll be your mirror.
A note I found interesting about the translation, which you might have also honed in on, was the way it is just on the edge of being outwardly anachronistic, but not quite. It refers to going.
It dips into it a few times.
But it's always like believable that this could have actually been the original thing. Like a sofa is referred to, which isn't necessarily anachronistic.
The ticking red taxi of the incubus.
The centaur's place is referred to.
The glass bottom boat Athena pointed.
Yeah.
Zeus looked. Yeah. No, it's a translation that is clearly meant to draw the connection and to replace. Both to replace items to make them more culturally locatable in the modern, but also just to be a mystic about it.
Yeah. But anyway,
a translator of a spiritual bent.
What do you make of the thing that happens after this translation?
The thing about Helen?
Yeah.
That seems to be a poem in and of itself.
It is, but what purpose does it serve? That's one of the kind of question marks for me in this thing. If you want to read the first few lines of that.
Either Stesichorus was a blind man or he was not. If Stesichorus was a blind man, either his blindness was a temporary condition or it was permanent. If Stesichorus' blindness was a temporary condition, the condition either had a contingent cause or it had none. If this condition had a contingent cause, that cause was Helen or the cause was not Helen.
Right. It continues.
And so on and so on.
It continues in this manner until we're being taken to the police station for questioning for offending Helen.
Yes.
And this
I mean, you've answered one of the questions there. It's because it's a hefty joke. It reminds me of Carms.
Yeah,
it's having fun with structure for the sake of structure. But
right.
It's like I feel like it's because the question of It's partially, there to highlight the fragmentary nature of the material that she's working with.
Right.
Because, how much can you really know about somebody who lived 4,000 years ago?
Yeah.
But also, the question of sort of the apocryphal story of Stersichoros being struck blind by Helen is, I think, has a fascination for her, but not one that she can approach directly. Because this book is not about that.
Yeah.
But I think it's clearly to her the single most fascinating element of the whole affair.
Yeah.
Is Stersichoros, is like what that means.
Right. Right. The story as it goes is that he wrote some slander about Helen, so she blinded him, and then immediately he turned around and wrote something complimentary of Helen and got his sight back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a goofy little... I mean, yeah, there is something about this ancient Greek poet that has a feel of the modernistic absurd.
Yeah, and that's like... But it's also about, like, the what happens when you say no to the source of things, when you reject that which is and when you embrace that which is, but also like being overwhelmed by beauty or not being overwhelmed by beauty.
Right.
It's like it's a lot of true seeing, which I think is meant to put you in a mood to view the things that happen in the narrative going forward from that point without judging them. I think, like, from a...
It may not have had that effect on me.
Yeah, it's like it's comparing sort of the tragedy of Stersichoros going blind and the tragedy of Geryon getting beaten to death. Or the dog getting beaten to death.
Yeah,
and just like the moral of the one story being, seeming more important than the moral of the other story, but the moral of the one story actually being, like getting to the heart of who this man was, like
right.
his feeling for this dog, this fictional dog, is way more telling than the tale of how he interacts with the muse.
And the dog doesn't even fucking turn up in the main novel. And this is like joked about in the very ending, like that this thing ends after a story is told with like an interview with Stersichoros, which ends with, "I'm glad you didn't ask me about the dog." But okay, let's get into the meat of this thing, which is like, okay, so I read these first maybe 15 pages, which are these really elevating, like, but heartbreaking jokes about
structural classicism.
Yeah, jokes about literature and poetry, and like talking about the power of adjectives and how this poet activated them in a new way, and this like just the amazing scenery of Hercules approaching over the ocean, and all this, and then all of a sudden, the concerns of the book transform entirely to those of the modern novel.
Yes, we're straight into naturalism.
Yes, and the mental vagaries of a sad little artist boy.
Yes,
and his
familiar territory.
Yes,
I would say
his heartbreak, his
suffering,
his unhelpful trip to the Spanish-speaking world, which is seemingly a theme on Truck's books.
Yeah, his weirdness, like his mental illness potentially.
Yeah, seemingly. But like narcolepsy seems to be a thing with this kid. Synesthesia comes up.
Yeah, he has a bit of a wandering sense of attention.
Yeah,
like her Geryon seems like intensely based on a real person.
Right.
Like the sort of like an extraordinary effort of empathy is felt, like for the author, who is like obviously so like overwhelmingly analytical and and high to try to is now like doing her very best to like tunnel into pre-rational humanity. Yeah, if you know what I mean. But
his like complete inability to really do so. Like, okay,
so you don't like the book or this book?
I don't dislike it. I didn't love it. I liked it. I loved the other stuff. I loved the ending and the intro.
Yeah, it's like it's very much like a case of you know, the first 15 pages of the book are the meat of the kind of thing that we really enjoy.
Yeah.
The puzzle box stuff.
But there is an important thing being done, right, by the main story. Not necessarily in the story itself, although it's good. Like, it's got an economy of language which is impressive, and I think probably in a similar way to the intro, just in a way that I'm having a more difficult time penetrating. I think the language is the main point here, rather than the what happens. I mean, and it was enjoyable on that level. Like, it's a very impressive consistently in how it has these tiny little weighty details that are very, very telling, just one after another. And that's like mainly what the narration is just these tiny little things.
Yeah, well, the character's a photographer, and his narration is photographic. It's a non-contiguous stitching together of moments.
Right. But, like, I think the main structural trick here seems to be that after this intro, which is so
beguiling.
Yes, like, we're suddenly dealing with suburban bleakness and sexual abuse and heartbreak. And we should say that what happens in this is Garyon, who is still a monster with wings, but living in a much more human way.
Right, but we're in Latin America, so magical realism is allowed.
Right, and he meets Hercules and falls in love with him.
Yeah,
and which gives the entire thing the feeling of a slow death, because you know
that Hercules
kills
is
Garyon
meant to murder him. Yeah,
but it never actually happens. Hercules never really kills him in the
exactly.
story. He just breaks his heart, maybe twice.
Yeah, well, it's more. I mean, he has a profound effect on Garyon's
well-being,
existence,
which was already pretty in bad shape to begin with.
He has a profound. If Garyon is an island, which he is, Heracles is the guy who goes to the island and irreversibly changes the island.
Yeah,
messes up the ecosystem, as it were, which is not like presented necessarily as a tragedy. I mean, as much as it is like a thing that happens. But that's sort of the point of the original poem as well. And I have the sinking suspicion that the other guy,
just Anne
Cash may be the dog.
Some Peruvian shows up. Some Peruvian shows up. It's not even a centaur. Like, the centaur, man, comes up in the poem. Why not?
You didn't ask him about the centaur.
Anne Cash is a much better fit for Garyon than Heracles. Those two have a lot more in common.
It's clear, but Heracles has that dashing rogue douchebag thing going.
And like the really frustrating thing with dealing with Garyon's character is that the main thing he seems to like about Hercules is how good the sex was.
Yeah.
Which, is like kind of a painfully familiar thing, if you've ever had your heart broken.
By a crazy person?
Like, just you want this kid to get the fuck over it, but he's not gonna, because it's hard.
You've been imprinted at a certain level. And you only get one youth, you only get one life, so that is a kind of murder. It's a murder of possibility because you've been rewritten. And like, I like how delicately that's handled. It's because the sort of like in a larger sense, the bulk of the novelistic portion of the book is also an act of translation. Like, as the author shows us in her first, like, impressionistic translation of the fragments themselves, like, she's willing to find the familiar, in terms of, like, the familiar object or the familiar concept in this text, and bring that out, even if it's not, strictly speaking, what was in the text.
Yeah.
And, like, so the neat trick that the book pulls, and I think the reason that the structure is the way it is that it allows one to be present for, or to think about what's going on in the book as a tragedy. Like, even though you're expecting at some point, Garyon to be murdered by Heracles, like, it reveals itself eventually that that's the one-to-one is not what this is. This is this is a story about.
It does tease you up till the end about it, though. Like, there's a threat of, there are like multiple threats of death in the final pages.
Yeah. You think that he's going to go up there to his death, but
Yeah, you think he's going to jump off the mountain. You think he's going to be murdered by soldiers. You think he's going to be murdered by people who still believe in the religion of the mountain.
You forget, if you say that there was a, like, when Garyon was 40 and looking back at this in like the first 5 or 10 pages of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
if you remember that, you know he's not going to die. Yeah. But the sense of foreboding is the same anyway, you know, which is a neat touch.
Yeah. That's a good read on it.
Yeah, I think that part of the appeal to just the sheer age and, like, you know, because there's certain classical there's a certain weight given just by invoking the ancient Greeks, let alone, you know, bringing in this obscure but lauded poet and giving us that fragment of the power of his work. Is to establish a kind of stakes that keeps you paying attention, right, and then makes you focus on the emotional tragedy at the core of this in a way that, you know, you might not care about otherwise.
It's true. It definitely makes it a lot more oppressive in a way.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like the molestation angle is I'm not down with that, partially because it's a red herring. Yeah. Like that it feels a bit like feels like the tragedy, but it's not the tragedy. Like, but we are definitely tempted to read it as the tragedy, particularly now. It
definitely veers dangerously close to
this is why he's gay,
right?
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, which may be because this book was written in the 80s, and that was still an idea that had some currency at that time. Yeah. No, it wasn't. It was in 1998.
Yeah, it was.
It feels older.
It never comes out and says that. Like, I think we should apply a note of caution to that. But it really does feel like it's hinting at it.
Yeah, there's like two. This book has like two elements of sex in it, and, you know, one of it is Garyon gets molested by his brother, and then the next is Garyon is attracted to this destructive gay relationship. Destructive gay relationship with an older kid.
Right, right.
Like, it feels like the clumsiest part of the book.
And his older brother is like a sports jock. Yeah. Like, which Heracles isn't, but it's still, there's an archetypal similarity.
Exactly. Like, Heracles is the man of action.
Yeah. I was wondering while reading this book if part of the point isn't still, even after the intro, something about literature and the history of literature. If it isn't in some way drawing our attention to the direction of literature toward these novelistic concerns of mental turmoil and individual sadness.
I mean, if it would, if it is, then it's a very long way of demonstrating that the novel is a much less effective way of communicating those concepts than a short, fragmentary Greek poem. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Or at least, I mean,
at least to our eyes.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a tough one. Like, it made those things feel much more near and present and immediate than the poems did. But the poems were more powerful.
I think that, like,
it's a different kind of power.
Yeah, I mean, part of the whole point of the Garyon thing is that he has this peak experience with this kid, and like the rest of his life is kind of
a sad epilogue.
Well, the rest of his life is kind of vague, you know, like, in partially that's because of his perceptual issues and, like, that he has a hard time being present at the best of times, and part of it is, like, you know, he experienced this one thing that was definitely really, really real, and then you know, he just drifts. Yeah. And I think that part of that commentary could be, like, you know, we had this contact, or maybe the author had this contact with the real thing, which was this poem, you know. The author brings forth the true thing, but the true thing is so incredibly brief, you know. Yeah. It's literally like 5 pages,
Less, probably.
Less. Like if you put it into a text file, it would be like
2 pages,
a paragraph. And so just like the kind of maddening attenuation of that same feeling over the course of this much longer narrative, I feel like maybe part of the way that she's drawing attention to the way that a life lived with wandering and having brief contacts with the authentic or the significant feels. But that's like me reading my own feelings about stuff into which is a sign of a good book.
Yeah.
But, you can't argue with the craft, I think.
No. There are a few moments where I can. Like, can you find, I think it's the opening of chapter 6 or something. There's a few sentences, like normally I'm very impressed with this author's skill with words, which makes a few moments like just kind of bafflingly
there were a few, there were a few clunkers.
Something about, what is this dawn? Next one, maybe? Next page?
Alright, hang on. As in childhood we lived sweeping close to the sky, and now what dawn is this? I will read that sentence again because it's a challenging one. As in childhood we lived sweeping close to the sky, and now what dawn is this?
Are you with me on that? You just kind of read that and go, yeah, sure.
You're swinging for the fences putting down a sentence like that. You're like, you're expecting the reader to be, to be giving you some mystical slack at that point, be like, okay, that's a little bit priestly. That's a little bit of the oracular babbling right there.
Yeah.
But maybe, that's like the head. Every one of the chapters has a sort of header, subject sentence.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read, because we're getting close to the end of this. I'm gonna read the thing that's attached to, because it's short.
Yeah, and I think it's good.
So again, as in childhood we lived sweeping close to the sky, and now what dawn is this? Mm-hmm. Heracles lies like a piece of torn silk in the heat of the blue, saying, "Geryon, please." The break in his voice made Geryon think for some reason of going into a barn first thing in the morning, when sunlight strikes a bale of raw hay still wet from the night. "Put your mouth on it, Geryon, please." Geryon did. It tasted sweet enough. "I'm learning a lot in this year of my life," thought Geryon. It tasted very young. Geryon felt clear and powerful. Not some wounded angel after all, but a magnetic person like Matisse or Charlie Parker. Afterwards they lay kissing for a long time, then played gorillas, got hungry. Soon they were sitting in a booth at the bus depot waiting for food. They had started to practice their song, Joy to the World, when Heracles pulled Geryon's head into his lap and began grooming for nits. Gorilla grunts mingled with breakfast sounds in the busy room. The waitress arrived, holding 2 plates of eggs. Geryon gazed up at her from under Heracles' arm. "Newlyweds?" she said.
The steamiest chapter in the book.
We ended up on the blowjob. So sorry about that. But like that would be the key moment, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Geryon's life, that's the axis moment.
That's true. I suppose.
As in childhood, we lived sweeping close to the sky, and now what dawn is this?
Nah, still don't like it.
It's the dawn that takes you away from whatever that.
It's unfair for me to pick on the one sentence that I didn't like at all.
No, this is good. It's good stuff. Like, I can. It's effective in that I can divine the emotions behind it. Mm-hmm. As is a little bit of a problem. I will admit. I feel like maybe it's a sentence that feels like it would read better in classical Greek. Yeah,
maybe it's a quote from Stesichoros, for all I fucking know.
For all you fucking know. That's the problem with reading these stuff by these priestesses and oracles.
Yeah,
is that they might be dealing with stuff that we are way too stupid to understand.
I'm told that the book is in the end dealing with Gertrude Stein in a way that I was completely unable to pick up.
Like in the end?
I think it's the interview. The interview is very funny.
Do you want me to end with the interview?
Why not?
This is the last part of this book.
Yes, maybe this will illuminate something.
After the book just stops in the middle of this trip that Geryon and Heracles are taking to a volcano, because it's a fragment. Mm-hmm. The book is a fragment. Interviewer. One critic speaks of a sort of concealment drama going on in your work, some special interest in finding out what or how people act when they know that important information is being withheld. This might have to do with an aesthetic of blindness, or even a will to blindness, if that is not a tautology. S. I will tell about blindness. I. Yes, do. S. First I must tell about seeing. I. Fine. S. Up to 1907, I was seriously interested in seeing. I studied and practiced it. I enjoyed it. I. 1907. S. I will tell about 1907. I. Please. S. First I must tell about what I saw. I. Okay. S. Paintings completely covered the walls right up to the ceiling at the time the atelier was lit by gas fixtures, and it glowed like a dogma, but this is not what I saw. I. No. S. Naturally, I saw what I saw. I. Naturally. S. I saw everything everyone saw. I. Well, yes. S. No, I mean everything everyone saw because I saw it. I. Did they? S. I was very simply in charge of seeing for the world. After all, seeing is just a substance. I. How do you know that? S. I saw it. I. Where? S. Wherever I looked, it poured out of my eyes. I was responsible for everyone's visibility. It was a great pleasure. It increased daily. I. A pleasure, you say? S. Of course it had its disagreeable side. I could not blink or the world went blind. I. So no blinking. S. No blinking from 1907 on. I. Until... S. Until the start of the war, then I forgot. I. And the world? S. The world went ahead much as before. Let's talk about something else now. I. Description. Can we talk about description? S. What is the difference between a volcano and a guinea pig is not a description. Why is it like it is a description. I. I take it you were speaking formally. What about content? S. No difference. I. How about your little hero Geryon? S. Exactly, it is red that I like. And there is a link between geology and character. I. What is this link? S. I've often wondered. I. Identity, memory, eternity, your constant themes. S. And how can regret be red, and might it be? I. Which brings us to Helen. S. There is no Helen. I. I believe our time is up. S. Thank you for this and for everything. I. It is I who thank you. S. So glad you didn't ask about the little red dog. I. Next time. S. That's 3.
That's 3. That's 3. The final line of the book.
The final line of the book is a joke that you feel like you can't quite get.
Yeah.
You know.
That's 3. 3 what? I truly don't have any clue. Do you?
I've no idea. Perhaps somebody who has read this book and really studied it can let us know. But no, that is such a lovely piece, right?
Definitely changes the mood after the dismal narrative. Mm-hmm. It's a certain kind of poem that is better to read than to hear, isn't it? Like the rhythm of it's the same thing in Carms. Like the rhythm of the attributions just works better in visual.
If you imagine what I just said without any punctuation whatsoever.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Mm-hmm. I saw it. Wherever I looked, it poured out of my eyes. I was responsible for everyone's visibility. It was a great pleasure. It increased daily.
A pleasure, you say?
Of course, it had its disagreeable side. I could not blink or the world went blind.
So no blinking.
No blinking from 1907 on.
Until
the start of the war, when I forgot.
And the world
went ahead much as before. Let's talk about something else now. See, that's how it's supposed to be read.
Yeah.
As a poem. I mean, as an Ionesco play.
Yeah.
You know.
Anyway, good book.
Yeah, frustrating, but intentionally, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's about Gertrude Stein, except about what it is to be a poet as a general matter. The fundamental thingness of things.
I think it was Gertrude Stein. If it was some other poet, I'll put their name up on the screen.
I bet it was Gertrude Stein.
It was Wikipedia who told me that. And I tend to think Wikipedia is right when it about analyzes literature.
Well, it's reporting the consensus, and the consensus is like 5 people who spend their entire lives thinking about.
Doesn't Gertrude Stein come up in the intro?
Yeah, of course she does. Yeah, I mentioned Gertrude Stein.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's it. I like the book. You should maybe read it if you like poetry.
Yeah.
You should definitely read the first part.
Yep.
Goodbye.
Bye.